What's up, everybody? The Game 2K2 here again, and I am here to continue my look back on the Max Payne franchise. And today we're going to be looking at the sequel to the original game. This is Max Payne 2, The Fall of Max Payne. We are currently looking at the Xbox Live port of this game, so we're literally looking at the original Xbox version. And again, the reason why I'm doing this is because not only do I want to see how these games hold up now, but I really want to see what Max Payne 3, which releases in about a month and a half, I really want to see what that game has to live up to. And after looking back at the original game, so far it's a lot. I really want to see what that game has to live up to, and yeah, let's see how Max Payne 2 holds up. Let's get started. Now, the development phase could not be any more different for Max Payne 2 than it was for the original game. The original game was a 4-year development phase, while Max Payne 2 was a year and a half. The main reason being is that by this time, Remedy really knew what they were doing by this point. It was no longer a guessing game on what worked and what didn't work. So they knew what they were up against. My only issue with Max Payne 2 from a development standpoint was really against a sequel being brought along so quickly for Max Payne. This game went right into development after Max Payne became a success, so I thought it was a little too soon. I was really worried that this game would be a rushed mess, it wouldn't live up to its expectations, and I was really worried. But that didn't happen. When it released to critical acclaim, and I liked the game when it released. However, I did have a few more problems with this game than I had with the original. First being with the story, mainly Max's dialogue. First of all, I love the story. It's a great story written by Sam Lake. He did a great job, especially for the time factor that he had. But again, it revolves around the time factor for the story because I always felt that Sam Lake was trying to fill in gaps, trying to fill in time with Max's dialogue, so he gave Max a lot of metaphors to speak in. And the reason why I guess that is because Sam Lake had 4 years to write the story for Max Payne. So he had time to go back and fix what he didn't like and to add stuff that he wanted to add. With this game, he had to pretty much write it in one shot, and I always thought, he added more dialogue for Max to kind of fill in time. And the metaphors start off great, but they get a little confusing towards the end of the game, which is my main problem with them. This is a big difference between Max Payne 1 and 2, these cutscenes. Max Payne 1 had a couple cutscenes, but they weren't really significant with the gameplay. It was mainly, like Max just standing there or the enemies running in. That was pretty much it, so they weren't really significant with the story. Max Payne 2 has longer, more story-driven cutscenes. The majority of the story is still told through graphic novels, which was introduced in the first game, but this game, included cutscenes, and the cutscenes are really well done, too, for both the PC and the Xbox versions. The PC a little more graphically enhanced than this one, but it still looks really nice, especially for the original Xbox. The PS2 version, on the other hand, had a lot of issues. Because the PS2 did not have quite the processing power of the Xbox, and was definitely not anywhere near the processing power of a PC. They had to really tone down the PS2 version much more than they toned down the Xbox version, so the game suffered from a lot of bad loading times. The frame rate was unbelievably horrible for the PS2, and the graphics overall were really shoddy. Like the character models, the environments were really blurry. They were kind of looked a little smeared in some areas, so it wasn't as sharp looking a game. But the PS2, for the most part, was the same gameplay, but because the frame rate issue really made the game almost unplayable. The Xbox version, on the other hand, which we're playing right now, for the most part, looks really good. But obviously, since the game was more graphically enhanced with a lot more cutscenes, they obviously had to tone a few things down. Like Max's hands don't move as realistically as they did in the PC version, and Max in general doesn't look as good as he did in the PC version. And the rest of the character models are a little shoddy. The environments repeat, but you know what? They're not major differences. So the Xbox version actually doesn't look, from the naked eye, that much different. And as you could probably tell already, this game is very story-driven. This first level that we're in, this hospital, is kind of actionless for the most part. You know, obviously we killed someone just before in that room, but that's really the only action in this scene. It takes a little while for the action to really come into play here. And that's one of the main differences between this game and the original. With the original game, the story was very 50-50. The story took up 50%, and the action gameplay took up the rest of the 50%. While this game is more 70-30, 80-20, somewhere in that range. You know, the story takes up a lot of the game. And you really don't notice when you're playing it. You really can't tell until the game ends that you realize, wow, that was really short. You know, the first game wasn't too long either. The first game took about 8 hours to finish. This game takes, you know, if you're really good, it'll take you about 5-6 hours. You know, if it wasn't for the story, this game would probably be only 2.5 hours. And these cutscenes, you know, I credit not only the developers, but I credit the voice acting as well. James McAvery, who returns to voice Max Payne, and the new voice actors they brought along for Vladimir Lem, Mona Sachs, and Vinny Godniti. You know, just awesome voice actors that really brought this story to life and brought these cutscenes to life. And they got some really, with the first game, because of the time they had it, most of the models that they brought in for the original Max Payne, and some of the voice actors were just, you know, employees of Remedy, you know, because they couldn't keep, you know, models, you know, for 4 years of development. So they literally just brought along people from Remedy. They did the modeling, they did the voice work. I think James McAvery in the first game was really the only professional actor they had for the first game. But with the second game, because, you know, it was a bigger budget, they were able to do more with this game. They brought along some great models, brought along some great voice actors, and it actually, the graphic novels and the voice acting turns out a lot better in this game than it did in the first game. And James McAvery gives a great performance, too, as a voice actor in this one. In the first game, his voice tone and everything didn't change much throughout the game. It was the same kind of level of tone that he kept through the original game. He actually does act in this game, so it comes out a lot better. And again, you know, we're about 8.5 minutes into this, and we're still watching this story. But again, you know, it's so good, and you get so engrossed into it that it doesn't really matter. And it's one of few games, you know, Max Payne included, in that list of games that I really don't like skipping the cutscenes because the story is so good. And I like the loading screens too. They have the models standing against, you know, green screen, and they add these backgrounds for the most part, and it's really great loading screens. It's not just, you know, just the regular pictures that the first game had. Now, story-wise, the main difference here is that the first game was very action-packed, kind of like this badass action movie type of tone to it. This game is much more emotional, very film noir, very romantic drama type of feel to it, which is why this new model for Max Payne is so perfect. You know, nothing against him. You know, it's mainly his acting that's doing it. He has this look to him that makes him fit the tone of the game. Sam Lake fit the tone of the badass, you know, attitude that the first game had, while this model fits the tone of the more dramatic and more emotional tone that this game has. Now we enter the first main action level in the game. And again, cutscenes like this did look better in the PC version, but not a huge difference. I think the only issue I have with the graphics on this version, this Xbox version of the game, is that Max in particular does not look as good as he did in the PC version. And sorry, I'm stuttering here. Apologize. The PC version, Max and the rest of the character models look awesome. And again, Rockstar, who developed these ports, the PS2 and Xbox ports, and they developed them for the first game too, had to tone things down since this game was a lot more graphically demanding, which is why the Xbox version was toned down and the PS2 version was even more toned down. And this is something I never mentioned with the first game. These TVs, and I don't even think I mentioned it in my original review. These TVs show like television shows, and in the original Max Payne, they were kind of more like soap opera comedies. In this game, each of these television shows is reminiscent of Max's life. A guy dying over his wife. Some of the dialogue that you hear. Is a guy emotional over his wife. Some guy, talking about, like the first scene in the Max Payne 1, where Max, is going to his house and all that stuff. The very first scene in the hospital actually has the dialogue from Max Payne, the character on that show, saying what Max says in the first game. It's actually really interesting. And they're really entertaining too. All they are is, still images that play over and over again, but, they're so entertaining that you actually will stand there and watch them. Now this I found a little aggravating and when I first played it, and I still find it kind of aggravating now. There are moments throughout the game when you have to follow people, until they open doors for you and all that stuff, and they walk very slow, and you have to wait for them. So you'll literally be at your destination, and he'll still be walking at 2 miles, half a mile an hour. It's really annoying. Now this in the PC I loved because, I'm not going to do it here. When I played the PC version, I initially pushed him against the box, and he glitched out, and he got stuck behind the box. I never got that door open.